Tonight on the show, we got legendary Miami radio personality Kim Kid Curry. Stay tuned.
Welcome to Talking Junk.
I'm your host, Jason Melendez.
Live now every week on Fridays.
Talking Junk.
A multitude of professionals in different aspects, different walks of life.
You have to come on and talk junk like a normal person.
Welcome to Talking Junk, the podcast that comes to you live every Friday night from Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, and Twitter. And also, I've been saying it for weeks, the website, www.talkingjunknetwork.com. You can find all content from both shows there. So be sure to click on that. You can also find the link to where guests, which brings me to our guest tonight, the legendary Miami radio personality, Kid Curry. How you doing tonight, sir?
I'm doing fine, Jason. Thank you. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing pretty good. Pretty good.
Good.
Long day work. I'm excited to get into this conversation.
So, what part of the world are you in?
Oddly enough, right now, I am in Florida. I am in Sanford, Florida at the moment.
I see. Okay. I'm in Loveland, Colorado.
Big change of scenery.
Yeah, it's a nice little area up here. It's in the northern part of the state, about an hour north of Denver. And got lots of snow outside and more coming. So.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I'm looking forward to moving back up north myself, hopefully soon.
You know, when I was in Miami for 25 years. I used to tell people there's no way I would ever go back to anything cold. I just couldn't stand it. But after I got diagnosed with MS, you know, there's a balance. You have to decide what you can live in. If you can live in the heat or you can live in the cold. And it's easier for me to live in the cold than it is to live in the heat. So I had to move back home, damn it. But whatever. Well, I saw in one of your last broadcasts, I saw that you were having cocktails. I don't see any out there tonight, but I'm going to have one. Been waiting all day to have a cocktail. So.
Okay. Can I get the whiskey, please?
Can I get the whiskey, please?
I just picked up some new stuff today. I've seen some guy on TikTok drinking it. It's called Screwball. It's peanut butter whiskey.
Really?
So I bought some Frangelico. I thought maybe it would go perfect with it. So
there you go.
I was going to wait for tomorrow, but we'll try that tonight with you.
There you go. I'm with you.
So radio guy, how'd you get into radio?
You know,
I believe
it was crazy. I was a trumpet player in high school. In the high school band. The only A's I ever got, there you go, Screwball. There you go. Okay. The only A's I ever got in school were in music. And so I was pretty bad a high school student, but my dad worked at the only radio station in my hometown. And when I say the only one, that's the truth. There was only one, and my dad worked at that radio station, had a bunch of his friends in there. They were all local guys from right there in town. And they all worked on the radio station there with my dad. And nobody wanted to do the Sunday morning God show, which is when what they did was they recorded all the church services from the week before and they play them on Sunday morning. And nobody wanted that job. So my dad hooked me up with that job. And that's kind of how I got started in radio.
Hey, you got to start somewhere.
Well, you know, it's a funny thing. I went to college for a couple of years, studied whatever I could to learn as much as I could, because once it's show business, man. It's like girls paid attention. And there you go, Kahlua. So the girls paid attention. I kind of got into radio because of the chicks. So I went to college for a couple of years and I dropped out to go get my first full-time job in Knoxville, Tennessee. And then spent about 6 months there. And there you go. What's that?
Top it all.
Okay, there you go. Got it. There you go. About 6 months after I got to Knoxville, I ended up in Miami. And that's when I was like 22 years old and, living in a little small town in Colorado. Being in Miami was like swimming pools and movie stars.
I bet.
It really was. And you got to remember, 1976 in Miami absolutely was Miami Vice. I mean.
Oh, I could just imagine.
Well, I
think to myself, I was born in the wrong era.
Well, Yeah, I got to live. I knew a guy who had a Pantera who would drive from Key West
It's pretty
with
good.
his car loaded down and drive faster than any cop car. And, but just it was just early days of my Miami life. And it was quite the thing. But, I got there when I was a young kid. And then, 33 years later, I was the oldest guy in town. And I had bounced around. After I got to Miami, I worked a couple stations there. The two guys I worked for in Miami, I didn't know when I got down there. Like I said, I got into radio because of the chicks. But the two guys I ended up working for down there were legends and were trendsetters. And I hadn't even heard either of their names. Now, I had listened to their radio station before, because when you're in college, and remember, you're talking 1973, 74, 75, there really was not even top 40 music on the FM dial back then, because the FM dial in the early 70s, it was the hippies. And they were like, hey, and before that we heard, and then before that we heard, and then before that we heard. So there really wasn't top 40 radio on the FM dial. So sometime in the early 70s, that transition from AM top 40 began on to the FM dial. And one of the legendary FM radio top 40 battles was in Miami. So when I was in college, we used to listen to tapes of these two stations, 96X and Y100. And, that was when we were sitting back smoking dope, playing air checks, and just going nuts, thinking these people are innovative, because these guys in Miami were giving away more money than we had ever heard of. They were talking to the people. They were having beach parties because they were in Miami. So it was like a real show. And so for guys in Colorado going to college, young radio students, we thought that was very cool. So when I actually
it was very cool. It was the trend at the time. Everybody wanted to be in Miami, especially for spring break.
Oh yeah, well, those are other stories. But anyway,
well, we don't want to get you in trouble with the missus.
Well, that's all right. She's heard them all. You remember she was we'll get into that later too. That's a whole nother story. So
hey, we
when
got
I got
time
down
for
there,
all of them.
oh well, we got time. Good. So these two guys were very, very innovative, and by the time I was at my first station down there, 96X, 8 months after I was there, the guy who hired me got thrown out because of a legendary radio contest. It was called Find Greg Austin in the Bermuda Triangle. Now, you can actually Google that. It's a court case. And Jerry Clifton was, unfortunately, the benefactor of the court case and was the one who took all the blame for it. But so he gets fired and everything. But instead of me leaving Miami, the guy across the street at Y100, now I'm talking about an FM top 40 battle, one of the first in the nation. So 96X was the secondary top 40 station. The primary station, the one that was the best and probably one of the finest in the country at the time, was called Y100. And apparently I had impressed them enough over at 96X that when word got out that I was going to leave town, they quick hired me up. So I went over across the street to work at Y100. But the connection I had with these two people really jolted me through my entire career. Both of them, you could Google either name right now, Jerry Clifton, Bill Tanner. These are legendary programmers in the radio business. And
well,
Bill has passed away. Jerry's still alive, but Bill has passed away.
There's a friend of mine that he he himself hosts a little show on Instagram, and he interviews legendary hip hop artists.
Yeah.
And I tell him all the time, when you are in the presence of legends, when you sit at that table often, you yourself become a legend in your own right. And that's exactly what happened to you when you walked across into your destiny.
Oh yeah, yeah. It was a college education. Oh, actually, it was a university education. I was going to college, a small college in Colorado, but these two guys working for them, it was a university education. So, and these guys really jolted me through my entire career. It was a good connection. And from Miami, I took off to San Antonio because Jerry Clifton hired me to be a program director in San Antonio. I was there for about a year, and then Bill Tanner went up to Washington, D.C., and got hired for one of the first $1 million programming contracts in the business at the time. And so he went up to Washington, D.C. to try to bring the Miami style of radio into Washington, D.C. And he brought me in to do nights, and it didn't go over very well. But there were some really exciting experiences there. I talk about my radio stuff, but underlying all these stories are the exacerbations of multiple sclerosis that I'm having that I don't know what it is. When I was in San Antonio, my whole right arm just curled up one time. I didn't have a clue what was happening. I thought I'd been bitten by fire ants because
Wow.
I'd gone over to my neighbor's house to get his newspaper one day because he was on vacation. A bunch of fire ants rolled up my arm. And I thought it was the fire ants that had caused my arm to do that, but it was a multiple sclerosis exacerbation. I didn't know what it was. When I was in Washington, D.C., my radio show, my radio name was Kid Curry because I was always the guy on the nighttime that appealed to the little kids because I had a teen voice. And, even today, I've got a very young sounding voice. It's not my fault.
Almost like Casey Kasem.
Yeah, this is Casey Kasem. Yeah, so I was always the nighttime guy. And one of the features I did at night before my show was over was called Bed Check. And I would have the kids call in, and I'd let them say whatever they wanted to say about a teacher. They could rip on their school, tell a joke about their mom, their dad. And I would just put these on, and I'd fire back a smart-ass comment. But now this was a real famous feature in Miami because I got there when I was very young and was the primary nighttime DJ in Miami. When I was in San Antonio, I didn't do that feature. But then when I got up to Washington, D.C., I cranked it back up again. But in D.C., remember where we are, it quickly went from being a teenage focus to an adult political focus.
Right.
And so suddenly I started having all these politician jokes and political comments. And one night I got a call from a guy. I was going through my calls, bed check, let the people say something. I say, bed check. And the guy says, hey, it's me, Frank DeFramer. I'm over here at the White House, and the president was just in my office listening to the bed check. And I was like, and I went on to the next call. But 3 or 4 nights go by, and this guy calls back, and I'm finally going, wait a minute. The next time he calls, I'm going to take him off of the live line, and I'm going to talk to him, find out who this guy really is, because he kept saying, well, the president was just in here, and this is Frank DeFramer at the White House. So I picked up the phone one time. It's okay. Whoa, wait a minute. You keep saying this. I'm assuming you're telling this is a joke for you. He said, no. Surprisingly enough, someone has to take care of the frames at the White House. All the portraits need to be maintained, and I'm the guy. They call me Frank DeFramer. And when I call you on the bed check and I say that President Reagan was just in here listening to the bed check, I'm serious. And I was like, whoa, I couldn't believe it. So that was just an acquaintance I made on my show. So a few years go by, and I've gone up. So in Washington, D.C., Bill Tanner, who hired me there.
Did you ever, circling back real quick, did you ever
Yes.
get to confirm that Reagan was indeed listening to you?
Oh, well, yeah, because let me finish the story here. I'll go on. So I'm in Washington, D.C. working for Bill Tanner. He decides, the market decides that the Miami style of top 40 radio is not necessarily what they want to hear in Washington, D.C. So our ratings fail miserably. Even though we tried to give away $1 million, nobody listened to us. It wasn't big enough ratings. So Tanner quick goes back to Miami. Now, I didn't want to follow this guy around the country all the time. So because I was in the Northeast, I wanted to stay in the Northeast for a while. So I got a job at B104 in Baltimore. So I'm in Baltimore at B104 for a while, having a great time, enjoying myself a lot. I got this girlfriend I'm hanging out with. Her grandma comes to visit from Texas. And one night at dinner, of course, I've got this friend at the White House. His name's Frank DeFramer. And she says, well, if you've got a friend at the White House, then let's go take a tour. I was like, oh, geez.
Calling you out.
Here we go.
Had to take a drink for that one, huh?
Yeah, man, it was a tough one. So so now I'm calling the White House. Now this connection on the telephone was just a connection. He told me his story. I didn't know if it was true or not. So I called the White House. Hi, I need to speak to Frank DeFramer, expecting to hear this click. But I hear this, oh, Frank. Yeah, hang on. Whoa, wait a minute. I picks up the phone. I'm like, Frank? Kid Curry. And so we had this discussion again. I'm like, listen, man, I told my girl's grandma that I knew you and she wants to come over for a tour. And he's like, well, listen, man, you come over whenever you're ready. Let me know what day. I'll tell the guys that you're coming. I'll let everybody know you're coming. Just tell them you're coming to see Frank DeFramer, and they'll bring you on into the White House. You can come into my office and everything, and I'll give you guys a tour.
Wow.
So now this is just after the Reagan assassination attempt.
Oh my God.
They had not changed the security around the White House yet. So I'm in my little Toyota Corolla with grandma on the back and the girl next to me and driving around the White House. And I've got to go. He said, just come on in. So I'm looking at streets that go into the White House, and I saw one that looked like that's the one I should take because it looks like it goes right up to the side. So I drive my little Corolla and I start going up to the side, and now the adrenaline had begun to rush.
Oh, yeah. You don't know what's going to happen. Secret Service is everywhere.
And know that multiple sclerosis is directly affected to stress. So I'm driving down this road to get up to the side of the White House, and it looks like this is where I'm supposed to go. But suddenly these guys start coming at me, and they're starting to pull their guns at me. And I'm like, oh, my God, now the adrenaline is really running. Now I immediately lose vision in my right eye. My right shoulder begins to contract, and my arm cramps up. I stop the car. I open the door, and I fall out. And these guys are going, freeze, freeze, freeze. I'm like, no, I'm Kid Curry. You're a Frank DeFramer. And they're like, kid.
I mean, technically, you were already frozen.
I was frozen. There's no doubt. I wasn't going nowhere. I just crawled out of the car. And so, but I thought I was going to go down. But when I said my name and I was there, Frank, oh yeah, Frank said you're coming. Come on in, we'll get you. Hey, can we get you a wheelchair? I'm like, no, get a wheelchair for grandma. Leave me alone. Okay. So it took me about 10 minutes for this thing to just calm down in my body. That was an exacerbation. I did not know I had multiple sclerosis at that time, but these little things kept happening to me. So I've gone from Washington, D.C., I'm in Baltimore, and then I get called back to Miami. The guys decide that they needed me to come back to Miami. And I went back to work for Y100. But by that time, Bill Tanner was gone from Y100. They had a new management regime in there. They just thought that having me back in the building was going to help them with the ratings because I had such success the time before.
Right. You came from prior success in Washington.
And had already been in Miami and already killed the ratings there. So, they just wanted me to come back and do it again. But, top 40 music changes, styles change. And it had been about probably 7 or 8 years that I had been in Miami. And by that time, it had turned over to this girl who was on the radio at night on Power 96.
So what year is this now?
We're talking about 1987, 1988.
I was just born.
Well, hey, welcome to my nightmare. So I go back down there. They want me to do my best, and I can't beat the girl that's on the competition. 96X eventually changed their name to Power 96. So I had come back to Miami on Y100. Power 96 had this girl on there named Bo Griffin, and she was just kicking my ass at night. I couldn't beat her, and I got fired from Y100. First time I've been fired. No, probably the second. Who cares? So I'm sitting there for about 30 days.
Was it the first time you got fired because of a chick?
Oh, come on, man. My wife would be hearing this.
I'm sorry. I got to ask the hard question.
That's all right. No. So, I eventually, after 30 days of sitting on the beach in Miami, not really needing to do anything, I got severance and I was in a good way. And I was going to actually wait for my 6-month no compete to fall apart and then go back to work in Miami somewhere. But 30 days after I got out of Y100, the midday guy on Power 96 dies. So then by this time, Bill Tanner had now gone over to Power 96. So he says, wait a minute, we've already worked together on Y100. I'm now over here at this station. Come to work for me over here. So I'm now in Miami.
Right back where it all started.
Where it all started. On the original station, 96X, they just changed their name to Power 96. But then in 1992, of all goofy things, man, my father had been in a head-on collision with a tractor trailer in the 70s. in his car and had done serious damage to his knees. And by 1992, if you're not old enough, maybe you're old enough to remember, in the early 90s, they didn't know what the flesh-eating disease was. It was just breaking out. There were antibiotics that were turning against themselves, and your flesh was just getting eaten up. The more antibiotics they tried, the more it didn't work. And my father got stuck in that. And in 1992, they amputated both his legs. So at that point, I left Miami. I left Power 96 to come back to my hometown here in Colorado, my little one radio station town.
To take care of your dad?
Take care of my dad. You know, he needed ramps put in the house and everything. You know, and plus my mom, and she needed some support. And my dad was going through this new life of not having any legs. And I got to learn what phantom pain was and things like that, man. You know. So, but I was only here for a year back home here in Colorado when he started saying, "What the hell are you doing here?" He was, "Get back to Miami. You were a pretty big guy once. You weren't supposed to," because he was a radio guy. He knew what kind of gig I was having. He knew what success I was having and could not believe I was home. So a year later, I started considering going somewhere else. But then Miami called again. And so here I am now going back to Miami for the third time.
When destiny calls, you got to answer.
Well, a year after I get back to Miami, they make me the boss. You know, I was the youngest kid there. And after all this time, I guess they finally realized, and they did. It took them a while to hire me. In fact, it took them 6 months. When they dismissed the program director that brought me back in 1995, when they dismissed him in 96, they made me the interim program director. Now, I had been the interim program director at other stations before. They always say that, and then they say, "Oh, we're considering you for the job," but I knew better.
Then give it to somebody else.
So they were bringing in the geniuses of the business, man. They were bringing in, I could say names, and the radio guys would be going, "Really? Really?" Well, they were bringing them all in because it's Miami. And by that time, Power 96 was a very well-established radio station, and people wanted to run that place. So 6 months into them making me the interim, they weren't paying attention to what I was doing. So I started making some changes to the radio station. And suddenly the monthly ratings started going up. So 6 months into this thing, they hadn't found the real program director. And they finally, Greg Reed, the GM, said, "Well, I guess it's going to have to be you."
Well, sometimes you got to change the culture, man. You got to give a shock to the system to make everything work.
That, you know, to me, it was easy for me, but you know what? Here's the truth. I was the teenage disc jockey in that market for many, many years, and none of the managers ever took the little kids seriously because the groupies always came knocking on the door for Kid Curry. The groupies were always in the front office. "Where's Kid Curry?" They were always, I would be at appearances and be harassed. I'd have boyfriends try to beat me up because their girlfriends would listen to me on the radio and they thought that they were having an affair with me just because they loved me on the radio.
Now, I didn't ask these questions, so if you get in trouble.
No. These are all cool. My wife she understands this. So they didn't want to take me seriously. But, you know, I kept telling them, "I'm the guy. You better stop it." And if you look at the ratings, they're going up. And they just finally said, "Well, you must have something going on here." Because you know what I did? It's Miami. And there had never been a concentrated effort for a top 40 Spanglish radio station. You know,
you got to appeal to the culture.
Ricky Martin had Spanglish songs. Mark Anthony. I could play Wyclef, Shakira. I could play all these things that were Spanglish-ish. And no one had ever really concentrated on doing that. In fact, I actually went out to the Latin record companies, would go to their conventions and tell them, if you just give me a bilingual version, do a chorus in English, do a verse in English, do it both ways. Just give me some of that and I'll play it. If they're good enough, I'll play them. And so what it did is it ended up
out there's always been a little Latin. There's always been Latin culture.
It's
Miami.
Well, I married a couple Cubans, so you know. So, you know, it's and I had to being a gringo from Colorado, a redneck from Colorado. Eventually, I ended up being pretty bilingual because you just have to in Miami. That's part of your deal. When I went down there in '76, it wasn't like that. Remember, there was a big cultural change after the Mariel boat left. the Mariel boat lift. And when that happened, everybody started leaving Mariel and coming into Miami. It really caused a major cultural change. So it made sense to me to be bilingual. And believe me, oh, well, there was a specific incident where I brought a song into my GM. Actually, I brought a song into my music meeting that I've been out to LA for a weekend, and I heard a song by Artie, the One Man Party. And the name of the song was, yeah, it was a great song, but it's called Esa Nena Linda. Esa Nena Linda, Cosa Cara Bella. And it was a real little 2.5 minute short song. And I brought it into my music meeting, and I told my staff, I said, okay, listen, here's the direction I want to take the station. I want to find songs like this. And the GM, the guy who put me in that position, was sitting in the room, of course, wanting to know where his new program director was going to take the radio station. And I played this song. And when it was over, it was quiet in the room. And he said, "You're going to play that song on my radio station?"
Uh-oh.
And I said, "There's no reason why I shouldn't, Greg. This fits." And he walked out. So I said to my staff, "Go find me as much as you can. Watch." And a year later, we had the highest ratings in the history of that radio station. Power 96 spent years as the most listened to radio station in the Southeast United States. They have cumulative audience numbers that you can look up in Arbitron from those days. And you'll see the cumulative audience in Miami that I had was bigger than Atlanta, bigger than St. Pete, bigger than, all those other places. Tallahassee, our cum was bigger than everybody else's because we fit. It fit. So for 9 years, the station did better than it had ever done. But into the 8th year of this 9-year thing I was doing, I started having these MS exacerbations that were happening more often. I started losing my gait. I couldn't walk straight. My vision in my right eye, once it dimmed, it never came back because it had always come back. My shoulder, I could barely even move my shoulders. And my toes would cramp up into circles. And it got so bad right around the time of the tsunami in 2004, 2005, right around that time, I was home visiting my mother here with my family, my wife and my kids. And we were watching the tsunami on TV, and my mom kept saying to me, "There's something wrong with you. You don't look right." And I kept telling her, "Mom, I run the biggest radio station in Miami. I'm watching a tsunami. We'd never even seen anything like this before on the TV screen."
The ones closest to you always know, though.
But, she was like, "When you get back to Miami, go to the doctor." And when I got back to Miami, I went to the doctor. And, it took a month to get into the doctor because it was a multiple sclerosis problem I was thinking of. Well, actually, they started testing a month after I got home. It took another month to 6 weeks after that before they finally culminated all the information to find out that I was at a corporate meeting over in Naples, Florida. And I was in my corporate office on a Friday afternoon with all the geniuses of the company in there. And my phone rings. It's my doctor. And my doctor, I go to another room and I tell her, "I'm in a meeting. It's got to go quick." And she says, "Well, you need to see me on Monday because I'm deciding that you've got multiple sclerosis. I'm diagnosing you with multiple sclerosis." Now, I didn't even know what that meant. So on the drive back to Miami, remember I'm over in Naples. It's a 3-hour drive across Alligator Alley to get back to Miami on the other side of the coast. During that 3-hour time, I was on the phone with my wife, who was doing the 2005 version of Google, and reading to me things about multiple sclerosis, and none of it sounded good.
You're right. I mean, that's the one thing they tell you never to do is to Google what you got and see what the internet has to say about your symptoms. I am a very bad victim of this. I tend to see little hints of things inside myself when I look on the pages, and by then I'm dying. So it's better to just stay off those things. You never know what you got until you really go to the doctor and run those tests.
My MS has made me kind of a hypochondriac. Every little thing that goes on with me, I'm like, "Uh-oh, what was that? What was that?"
Yeah, so this COVID couldn't have been a good thing.
Oh yeah. Well, it's still I'm immunocompromised. I mean, I've already got all 3 shots and looking for the next one. I'm going to go get another one here in about another week or so. My wife is going to insist I get my 4th shot. So when the diagnosis is made, I go home that weekend. My wife and I had a real serious conversation. Go back in the office on Monday. Now, this is where it kind of gets a little sticky. But I don't hold anybody responsible. I understand the problem. I go back to the office and tell the GM, gee, man, actually he says, hey, you left the office so quick the other day over in corporate. They wanted to know why you left. And I said, well, the reason is because my doctor had said that I've been diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. And he was like, what? And that was my GM. Okay. So a few hours go by. And he comes into my office and he puts a song, he puts this CD up and waves it in my face and says, we got to be playing this song. And one of the things that, kind of made me famous, or actually I learned from Bill Tanner and Jerry Clifton, is when you decide what your station is supposed to sound like, don't let anybody tell you what it's supposed to sound like. Right. So I had learned not to listen to general managers who sometimes want to push their things onto my station. And I wouldn't do it. So Greg had this song. He wanted me to play it. And I said, no, it doesn't belong yet. I've got it in the research. I will pay attention to it. I will let you know when it's ready to go, but it's on my radar. He leaves my office. And an hour later, I get on the intercom, Kid Curry to the sales manager's office. I get down there and they tell me I need to go home for a week and reconsider playing this song.
What?
Now, I don't know.
Do you remember what song it was?
Oh, I do. Yeah. Was it Black Eyed Peas that had a song? I wonder, take you home. Da, 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 da.
Yes,
it had the hook line of I wonder, yeah, whatever that one was, whatever that had the hook line. And I think it was the Black Eyed Peas. I could be wrong. I'm sorry. My MS has ripped my memory out. So, but so did me telling him I had multiple sclerosis make him want to fire me and get rid of me?
And maybe thought he could assert his dominance just because you were in a compromised state at the time with your emotions.
Well, it's either one or the other. I went home for the week.
When they're down is a lot of people's philosophy. It's a fucked up philosophy, but some people have it. So I went home. And now by the time that I'm running Power 96, my 2 major consultants are Bill Tanner, Jerry Clifton. So we've got this whole Miami consortium. We used to call it the Miami Mafia, is running the most famous radio station in Miami. We've got the 2 geniuses that created the real beginning of this Miami sound. And now it's being done by me. So we've got this triangle of power. And we really feel like we know what we're doing. So I went home and I called Bill and I said, Bill, Greg found out I've got MS. Then he sent me home for a week. And I think Bill was taken aback by that. He thought, I think he immediately went into the legal possibilities. Right. You can't do that to me. You can't do that to a guy like me. But you know what? I didn't care because during that week, now, remember, stress matters with MS. Now, I've been told to go home. I've been recently diagnosed within 48 hours of multiple sclerosis. It sucks, though, because you're a legend of your stature shouldn't have been treated that way.
Well, probably.
You should have been shown out with grace. You know what I mean? A whole hour probably in tribute to you on the show, reoccurring every few hours. You know what I mean? The same way they do with the songs, it reoccurs every hour or so. You needed to have that promotion out there that showed that you were retiring, and people could. Nowadays we call it giving you your flowers.
Right.
They should have did that for you, with all the things that you've done for them in enhancing the sound for Miami in their behalf and really giving them the power.
Well, I can tell you that during that week I was out. I came back after being gone, And I thought I was going to go back and be fired. I thought, well, this guy has decided that he doesn't want a cripple around. Sorry if I call myself a cripple, but I suddenly got disabled, and I felt like, oh no, geez, I got this disease and the guy's going to fire me. What's going on here, But when I went back in the office, he says, you know what? I need to move you to a different part of the office. I don't want you to go anywhere. We need to take care of you. So I need you to move over to maybe consider being the general manager of the two stations. We had an AM and an FM. He wanted me to oversee the both. He was going to get a program director. There was already a program director for the AM. And I was just going to be the overseer of both properties. But by that time, in that week that my wife and I sat back, that was when we decided that was it. Because we
Your
knew
mind was already made up.
Yeah, we decided that multiple sclerosis had to be the focus because it was coming down on me hard. So while he's trying to say, okay, let's move you to a different position, I'm saying, no, Greg, I'm leaving. I'm done. And he's like, no, go home, think about it. You've got to think. I don't want you to go. I want you to stay under our protection. We can take care of you. And I was like, no, I'm done, Greg. I'm out of here. So I went ahead and resigned. And I was sitting in my office the day I told him I was going to go home. I was going to clean out my office. And of course, one of my thoughts was, well, gee, how am I going to take care of my family? I knew I needed to take care of my physical self because it was falling apart. But of course, how am I going to take care of my family? And
right, that's always the main focus of a man, no matter how much you're hurting, no matter what your ailment is, you always want to make sure you can provide for your family.
My job was so crazy at times. The office manager, her name was Phyllis, and I love Phyllis Poulos. Phyllis would come into my office all the time and say, sign this. She used to smoke a lot. Sign this. And I would just sign stuff because she just didn't, he's too busy, sign this. So at one time over the 9 years, she had put in front of me a piece of paper that I signed that was a lifetime insurance policy. And I didn't know it. I had a long-term insurance policy that I didn't even know that I'd signed. So on that morning when I'm sitting back going, and people are coming to my office because the word is getting out that I've resigned, I'm going to go home, I've got to get back and figure out what I'm going to do. My body's failing. And one of the people that came to my office was Phyllis Poulos. And I'm like, Phyllis, what am I going to do? And she's like, you don't have to worry about anything. I'm like, what are you talking about? She says, dude, you signed that paper. It's like, what do you mean? She says, well, you have a long-term insurance policy, and they will pay
God
you.
bless Phyllis.
Oh yeah, and they ended up paying me half what I was making at the time, and I was making well over $250,000 at the time. So whoa! It was something that it was. Then suddenly, that weight was lifted from me, and then my wife and I could make rational decisions because we didn't have to worry about income.
Right.
And so we decided that we needed to get out of Miami because the income was good, but it wasn't enough to sustain me in Miami.
It's not now either. So
no way. You're right. So we figured that, let's go back to Colorado. Let's go back to my hometown because I still had high school friends here. My mom is still here. So we just decided, let's just go back to my hometown. My wife and I became fixers and flippers. We spent a lot of my income on fixing and flipping. And during that time, my wife didn't like the way that the real estate agents were treating her. So she decided to become a real estate agent. 2 years,
Monopoly.
2 years later was breaking per capita records in the state for real estate sales. 1 year sold like 160 some houses. Just nuts. And this is all because I got sick. It was just crazy. And now she's now parlayed that. That was what 2008 or 9. We're in the 20s now. She is now an international real estate business consultant. I mean, she's got clients around the world. So this whole thing. Okay, so let's get back to me. Okay. So
what you drinking there?
This is a Limoncello Martini. It was a double. I knew I'd be here for a while. So then I leave the station 2005. Over the next 8 years, I go from still being able to walk to walking with a crutch to walking with canes and then being in a wheelchair within 3 years because I'm done.
Wow.
I can't walk. In fact, even as I'm in my wheelchair now. That's my wheelchair head thing. So I'm in my wheelchair now. I also,
You still look good though.
well, it's funny. That's if you, all the MS patients out there who are listening to this, and they will eventually, because I'll promote it too, are going to say that's what they all say. MS, we get that all the time. MS patients are fine till we stand up, and then poof, bonk. Sorry, So I went from having this kind of normal life to when you're Kid Curry and you're a famous DJ in towns across America, and then you're running the biggest radio station in Miami, you're the kind of guy that people gyrate toward. They want to be next to you.
Right, you command the following.
Well, but then when you are a guy on a crutch and then you're in a wheelchair, what you learn is people don't want to be next to you. So I went through
and
a real mental.
Sucks because nowadays it wouldn't be like that. I don't believe.
Well, in the little town in Colorado that I was in, I can tell you that whatever town I'm in, I've traveled to other cities in my wheelchair. I've been to Disney World. People deal with you differently when you're in a wheelchair. They don't want to be around you. They move away from you. In the beginning of it, it used to really bother me, man, because, like I said, I was Kid Curry. People wanted to be next to me. Then all of a sudden, nobody wanted to be next to me. I mean, it was my friends I would even see, trepidation in my friends about taking me places.
That's how you find out who your true friends are.
Well, I stepped out of a friend's car one time and hit the deck, and he laid me. He left me on the ground there until I went to my house and had my son come out to pick me up. He, I guess, felt weird about picking me up, but so people treat you differently.
Hold on, time out. He felt weird about picking you up, but didn't feel weird about leaving you on the ground and going to your house and getting your son.
My son is the one who came to pick me up. So
that is amazing.
Yeah. Well, I don't blame anybody. Because you know what I did after, So now we're going into the 8th year of my physical condition failing miserably. And my doctor all of a sudden says, listen, these drugs you're on, and at that time I was taking a drug called Rebif. And I've been taking Rebif for about 7 years, and my condition was failing still. And the doctor said, well, when I first got diagnosed, there were only 4 or 5 MS medicines at the time. So when you fast forward 8 years later, there are now 10 medicines on the market. And so my doctor said, 8 years into my condition, let's change your medicine, man, because this stuff is not helping you. We need to see if we can change the medicine and get something to help you. And then he said this. He said, I believe, because my doctor he's a scientist MS doctor. That's all he does, and he treats it like nobody else. He really gets it. And he said, I believe vitamin D, if you will change the drug and you start taking vitamin D, and I mean massive amounts, you're going to see a change in your condition. Well, I'm a radio DJ, okay? I used to make jokes about my mom calling my radio show, and she'd say, take your vitamin C, while she's sniffling, and I'd be, come on, Mom, vitamins don't do nothing. And so when my doctor's telling me to take vitamin D, I'm like, listen, I'll change the medicine, but the vitamins are nothing. And so for 6 months, he said, take them, and I said no. And then my wife finally, after 6 months, said, take the damn vitamins. So I changed the medicine, I took the vitamins, and 6 months later, my condition stopped failing. I leveled off. Things that were happening to me consistently stopped happening. I'm right now, my bladder used to fail all the time. It's not failing anymore. Now, I can tell you that my legs are still in constant seizure. I take a drug called baclofen, 80 milligrams a day, to try to get my legs to stop seizing, but it's adrenaline, it's stress induced. So they're stressed right now. They're sticking straight out right now because the adrenaline's running.
I'm sorry. They say I have a face for radio.
Yeah, it's okay, man. You're exciting me over here. So suddenly, everything kind of just went into neutral, and it really that was another mental change, because I was going down so much in my mind. I was, what's going to happen? I'm going to die. My family, what am I going to do? And then suddenly it went like this, and everything that was happening at the time is happening today, but it hasn't gotten worse. And so it's kind of freaky. The doctor says that, what happens in multiple sclerosis patients get lesions in their brain. Now, they say you only use 3% of your brain. Well, what happens sometimes is your brain lesion gets wired around. So some of the things that have been happening to my body, my brain has wired it differently. And I've gone past some of the problems that I had.
The brain is an amazing thing.
Science. I'm a big believer in science. So then I had to start changing my mindset. There I was being Kid Curry for 33 years. And then I was Kim Curry, the guy with multiple sclerosis. And I'm going down pretty quickly to suddenly I'm Kim Curry, and it's not so bad anymore. And maybe I should try to figure out, after a couple of years of sitting around going, now what? Now what do I do? It got into my head that I needed to tell my story. Now, the reason I needed to tell my story, that happened.
Listen.
Well, after 10 years of this MS thing, remember, when I disappeared from the business in 2005, I really disappeared. There really wasn't any big goodbye stories. There wasn't any big, because...
Right, you just faded to black.
I just was gone. And people wondered. It was on, YouTube and Facebook. Whatever happened to Kid Curry? And it's actually in the trade magazines. They were even, what happened to Kid Curry?
I thought I'd seen you in that Waldo book.
There he was. So it was really a mystery to some people, and no one stayed in touch with me. It was really kind of crazy. It really bugged my wife. Very few people reached out to find out if I was okay. And that went on for about...
That is not okay.
Well,
all the people from Kids Past, it is not okay. It's not okay to just leave your friend out flat, especially in this time of need. Especially when you know what he's going through is stress induced. You don't think that leaving him flat out induced more stress? It did.
It really bothered me. I can tell you that it bothered my wife more than me. And that's the truth. My wife was the one who really...
But that's what bothered you, is that she was bothered by it.
Yeah. But there was one guy. I'm a 420 baby.
Hey.
That's me, 420.
That's mine and my wife's anniversary.
Oh, cool. 420 kids. There you go. I've got a friend who was an April 1st baby. His name was Vince Pellegrino. So after, during my time in the business, every 1st I'd call him, every 20 he'd call me. On April of 24/1, we'd talk to each other. So as I was gone from the business, every year I still got that call from Vince Pellegrino. Good. Now, Vince owned an influential radio magazine in the industry. It was called Sin.
I thought you were going to tell me Pellegrino.
What's that?
I thought you were going to tell me he owned Pellegrino.
Oh, no. Vince owned this Street Information Network. For those who were in the radio broadcasting business, anytime from the late 80s to 2000 somethings, Vince Pellegrino, all the artists, you have a variety of artists who are backed by major record companies. Then you have the secondary record companies and the secondary artists. Vincent really went out of his way to try to promote the secondary artists in the business. Right. But a lot of those secondaries turned into big artists. I mean, I remember he was the first one to say Katy Perry, and suddenly Katy Perry was the biggest thing on the planet. He was the one who, back when Wyclef Jean, the Fugees were started, he was, hey, I was like, okay. And then, of course, the Fugees, so Vince was very influential in the business. And I would get the phone. I'm sorry?
He had that good ear.
Oh, yeah. Oh, he was magic. And in the business, like I said, if anybody's listening in the broadcasting business right now, they're going, Vince, we love Vince. So I get a call. It would have been, I can't even remember it could have been 2013, maybe 14. Vince calls me one afternoon. It was in September. And he says, listen, man. So Vince's magazine was such a big deal. I'm gonna give you more example of how important this guy was. You
Okay.
know that Katy Perry has big hit records. You know about all those that win the Grammys. You know those guys that win the awards. Well, they would not win those awards without the promoters who are getting their songs on the radio stations in America.
Yeah, the people that are doing the real work.
The real guys, the street workers. Well, Vince every year held a big award ceremony for the promoters who did the biggest work, who got the biggest hits on the radio and did the most work. And every year it was one of the biggest industry parties, but it was only for radio programmers and music people. It wasn't for anybody else. It wasn't a famous thing. It was only for us guys in the business. That it became the yearly Sin party, the yearly Sin Awards became a huge deal. I had never gone, but I had learned that it was a big deal because everybody would talk about it. In fact, I hadn't gone to the thing, but they had actually made me program director of the year one time.
Okay.
I could have gone to get the award at that thing, but I was running my radio station. I didn't want to get distracted by a magazine. Okay. But he and I were friends, partners. He called me in September, I think 2014, and says, listen, man, my award ceremony is coming up in November. I want you to come here because I want to give you a Lifetime Achievement Award. You disappeared. Nobody knows what happened to you. People miss you. They want to see you. And so I want to fly you and your family in for my award ceremony in New York this year. So can you come? And man, that hit me. Because all those things about people not paying attention, and I just disappeared and felt like nobody cared. Vince cared, and it really got to me. So he flies me and my wife and my fourth kid out there to New York, and his award ceremony every year was at B.B. King's Blues Club. I mean, it's a very, if you've ever been to New York and been to a blues club, B.B. King's
I was born in New York.
Well, B.B. King's is a big blues club, and he was very connected to B.B. King, and so he would let him have his award ceremony there every year. So, we get to the award ceremony, and I hadn't seen Vincent at all for 10 years. Okay, but there came a point to where the big bouncers came from backstage. I said, "Okay, it's time for you to come in." They wanted me to be in, but they wanted me to be off stage because they wanted to surprise everybody I was there. So they bring me to the back, and then I get to see Vince for the first time in 10 years. And there's a reunion there. Man, I missed that guy. I got a hug. I was crying like crazy.
The best hug ever.
Vince is dressed in this big overcoat with a scarf on and a hat. And he's completely covered up. I could just barely see his face. But I didn't think anything about it. I thought, man, it's Vince, I love you, man. He says, listen, I got to go start the show. So let the bouncers take you back here. You get set up, and then I'll call you up. Okay. So he goes up and starts the show. And he's the kind of guy that when he put his awards ceremony had fresh acts. I mean, Wyclef performed there. I mean, Katy Perry performed. This was not only an awards ceremony, but some of the acts that people were trying to promote would show up. So it was a big deal. Okay. And suddenly, Vince, he says, there's this guy that, he starts with a story of Wyclef Jean. Wyclef and I are personal friends, and his dad and my dad died around the same time. And it really helped form a relationship between the two of us. And I play hits, and I believe that songs like Wyclef Jean belong in Miami. So there was a song that Clefty had out. The Fugees had out, and for some reason it wasn't showing up in the research. And again, I'm playing my radio game. If it's not going to show up in the research I want to see, I'm going to take it off. I took it off. Vince called and he went nuts. What are you doing taking off that? He's your friend. He's going to be pissed off. And I said, he knows that if I make the decision, it's the right thing because he believes me. Don't worry about it. But Vince went crazy enough to where I said, okay, Vince, I'll put it back on. So that was the story he told in front of everybody. He says, this guy believes, and he believed enough to put this Cleffy record back on the radio. And here he is, it's Kid Curry. The place goes nuts. And there was a very famous person who took my wheelchair. I don't want to say his name. But I couldn't get up. They had a ramp set up, but it was set that my wheelchair got stuck kind of halfway. And suddenly this big, huge person who, if I said his name, you go, yep. He just picked up my wheelchair and put me on stage. And it was like, yo, what the hell was that? And so I get up there and I see people I hadn't seen since I left the business, 30 years of friendships.
Felt really good.
It was awesome. And then at the end of the night, I get off the stage and people are coming to me and they're saying, have you heard about Vince? Have you heard about Vince? I'm telling you now, everybody's coming by and remember, MS is stress related. My legs are sticking out. Sweat is pouring off me. I'm shaking and I've seen friends that I haven't seen in years and we're hugging and kissing, but they're all saying, have you heard about Vince? Well, Vince sends a message to me. So I need to see you tomorrow morning at your hotel. Let's have breakfast.
Uh-oh.
So he comes over to have breakfast with me and then proceeds to tell me that he didn't have much time left, that he brought me out there because he felt it was something he wanted to do for a friend. And so Vince was very, very sick. And his thought was to wake me up. He says to me, man, you've sat back long enough. You need to come back and do something. You got to do something. And I kind of even had the idea that maybe I would take over his magazine. I thought, Vince, do you need me to come and help you? Because his family was involved. Does your family need some help? Can I come back and help them? And he says, I don't know. Whatever you do, you've got to get back to work. And I went home pretty depressed, happy, but depressed, and realized after thinking about it that, music changes. There's no way I could be of value to anybody in the music industry. No way could I be valued in the radio industry because radio had changed by then. So all I could think to do was to tell my story, and to tell my story about my friend Vince, who picked me up and said, man, you've got to do something. And the something he got me to do was to learn how to write and become a writer and tell my story. And that's where I started writing books. I went out and I hired a writing coach. There's a lady here in Northern Colorado. She founded the Northern Colorado Writers Association. I hired her. 6 months. She didn't talk to me for 6 months. She said, if you want to learn how to write, here's some books you need to read. Well, because I'm a DJ, man, I can tell a great story. I don't know how to write a story.
Right.
They're two different things. But she gave me these books to read. One book that really mattered was a book called Save the Cat Strikes Back. Is that right? Save the Cat Strikes Back. I think that's the name of it. I don't know. Anyway, it taught me that if you're going to write a story, make sure you come up with the spine and then weave the whole story back to the spine. So I wanted to tell my story about my career. I want to tell my story about my diagnosis, how it changed my life, and how my friend Vince picked me up and said, come and do something. And so now I'm a writer. And so I hired the lady. 6 months later, I finally get a meeting with her. We start working for 6 or 7 months. I'm writing things and sending it back to her. She's critiquing things. And then it took a year to research all the things I wanted to write about. And then a year later, what's that?
Yeah, because you want to be thorough. You want to be political.
Oh yeah, I'm telling stories. Yeah, I'm talking about concerts that happened, things that really happened. I'm in San Antonio, and the first day I'm in San Antonio, the FM station. I went to work for the AM station, but the FM station was having a concert with the Beach Boys, and so I'm on stage, kind of in the background, watching all my staff do their stuff because it was my first day. I was just sitting back watching them, and one of the guys walks up to the mic. The guy's name was Joe Nasty. Joe Nasty.
Joe
cool.
Nasty.
Joe walks up to the microphone in front of 50,000 people, and he says, "Yo, show us your tits for Texas." And I was like, what? And I mean, my first day with the staff, and this was 1982. I didn't know you could do that in front of people, but apparently they did in Texas because everybody went nuts. And so,
everything's bigger in Texas.
Yeah, man, it was. So I told all these crazy stories. That's what they're in my memoir. Come Get Me, Mother. I'm through. All the funny radio stories and everything. That's where they are. Come Get Me, Mother. I'm through.
And you can find it right here on Audible.
There you go. Thank you very much. But once I got finished writing there, I wanted to continue writing because I kind of like felt like I was enjoying the creative process. And then, I don't know, this story has been going through my mind since the early days when I first got on the radio in 1972.
So
Remember, I
been
talked
following
about,
you your whole life.
oh yeah, and I didn't really even know it was a story until I got finished writing my memoir, thinking I need to continue writing something, and I went. I don't read. I have to hear audiobooks. So I went to the audiobook To Kill a Mockingbird. I never, in high school, I probably said, sure, I read the book because it was assigned. No, I didn't. I went back and listened to the audiobook of To Kill a Mockingbird. And I had this story that was kind of in my mind, but listening to the way that Harper Lee directed this story, all of a sudden at the end of it, it kind of like flashed. I'm like, there's the story. I know what I want to write about. Okay, now we're going to go back to when I was 17 years old and my dad got me my job at the first radio station.
Okay.
Remember I said it was the only radio station in town.
The only one.
All his friends worked there. And my dad really liked the fact that these guys were from Canyon City. They all loved the town. Everybody knew who they were. It was a real community thing. The town was behind the radio station. In 1981, Reagan became president. He wanted to deregulate everything. He fired all the air traffic controllers. He got rid of all the financial rules. He decided he was going to change the broadcasting laws, the rules that had been in effect since the early days of
things up.
Since the 1940s. Because radio was as it was, in the very beginning, the federal government had to decide how to stop these people who owned radio stations from lying about, selling snake oil, telling stories about people that weren't true, because it was the very beginning of radio. You just had to have money to buy the frequency, and you could broadcast basically whatever you want. To stop that from happening, the federal government came up with the Fairness Doctrine. Now, what the Fairness Doctrine said was pretty simple. Equal time for contrasting points of view. In other words, if somebody was on spewing lie about something, anybody listening to the radio at that time had the right to go to the radio station to demand equal time to debate the lies that were being spewed. Equal time for contrasting points of view. Well, Mr. Reagan thought that was antagonistic to the First Amendment. He says that people should have the right to say whatever they want, regardless. So we need to get rid of the Fairness Doctrine, the rule that required equal time for contrasting points of view. Now, this was put together as an act, the 1987 Fairness in Broadcasting Act. It was passed by the Senate and the House. President Reagan vetoed that law in 1987, which opened the way for the Federal Communications Commission to rescind the Fairness Doctrine. That was the rule requiring equal time for contrasting points of view. One moment.
Take your time.
Now, okay, so you have a president who says that people should have the right to say whatever they want to say. So you throw out that rule, and what happened? And then in 1996, this began happening actually earlier, but in 1996 the rules were dropped on ownership. It used to be you could only own 7 radio stations, AM and FM. Suddenly in 1996, you could own as many as you want. After 1987's decision by Reagan's FCC, you started seeing syndication. You could have one radio show syndicated on a bunch of different radio stations.
Yeah, like the Breakfast Club.
The Breakfast Club, absolutely.
Which is how iHeartRadio owns almost every radio station now.
And we can get into that. They don't like me very much. I can tell you that the only iHeart station I ever went up against, I kicked their ass. So thank you very much.
All right.
Anyway, I digress. So you take that rule out. So then you bring Rush Limbaugh in. You have Rush Limbaugh attacking and spewing things that cannot be proven, throwing out conspiracy theories that can't be proven, and you've got no debate. And all you have is this one stream of lies being spewed over and over again. If the Fairness Doctrine were in effect, every time anybody lied, anytime a conspiracy theory was thrown out on the AM or FM dial or on television, if the Fairness Doctrine is in effect, anybody can go and say, I want equal time to debate this, and you let the public decide. Now, you're not old enough to remember, but there may be some people here listening to us that may remember Saturday Night Live in the very beginning. Saturday Night Live actually had a whole feature. It was a whole bit, point, counterpoint. And in fact, they took the bit off of 60 Minutes because there was an official point counterpoint on 60 Minutes. It would have this old curmudgeon and and a woman, and they would give a point and a counterpoint. They'd give both sides and let the people decide. But on Saturday Night Live, you'd have Dan Aykroyd saying what he had to say, and then Jane Curtin saying whatever she had to say, and Dan Aykroyd would say, Jane, you ignorant slut. People who are old like me are laughing. They get it because that was part of the deal. But you had point counterpoint. It was legal. It was required to have both sides of the story told so people could form their own decision. Well, when you take out one side of that conversation and you let people spew nothing but lies, that's the reason we have a lot of the division we have in America today. Because you have people out there on broadcast airwaves, specifically one specific network, that lies. Now, the Fairness Doctrine has been revisited a variety of times since 1987. But remember, we have this systemic white supremacy in America. No, systemic old white guys running America. And the guys who love Reagan, remember, Reagan gave us the death of the middle class by giving the world corporate life. And he rescinded this Fairness Doctrine, and he is the guy who basically is responsible for the division we have in America today. That's what this book is all about. It's the death of fairness. It's the story about what happened to a small American town and its only radio station after President Reagan rescinded the Fairness Doctrine. His FCC rescinded that Fairness Doctrine again in 1987. And as recently as the last couple of years, there has been talk about returning some sort of a Fairness Doctrine. The way it's set up now, Jason, when Sean Hannity says something bad enough, and the advertisers start shutting him off, and he gets dismissed. That's the way it goes now.
Yeah, you get canceled now.
That's what happens.
Yeah.
The way you make this happen, the way you make all of these liars stop, is you make the broadcast entity responsible for what's being said.
Exactly.
So if you're not going to give both sides, we're going to fine you. And if you're not going to give both sides, we will fine you dearly until you cannot do this anymore. So that's how you stop this. You make the broadcast entity responsible for the lies being spewed as opposed to the person spewing the lies. Now, they have this in Canada. That's why it works in Canada. They don't have the division. Well, there is obviously certain division everywhere in every country. But the division that they have in Canada is nothing compared to the division we have in America, because they have a form of the Fairness Doctrine, of the Fairness Doctrine. They call it something else.
That's why we're the land of the free.
Yeah, free. Yeah, good for you. But you know what? So what I've done now, I'm a big believer that someday somebody's going to figure this out. The reason I wrote this book, I give it out for free. I got boxes of them, and I give it out to the girls at the Starbucks and the guys over at the juice place, and the guys over at Freddy's.
Put the word out.
I give it out, and at my dispensary, and when you go back and
at your dispensary,
at the dispensary down the street.
Okay, I thought you owned your own.
No, the dispensary down the street. And I tell them to read this because your government has done something to you that you're not aware of. And when they read this book, they all come back to me pissed off. Wait a minute. How can we let this happen? Well, we didn't let it happen. Ronald Reagan, the corporation lover, let it happen. Because what was happening back when the Fairness Doctrine was in effect, the cost of giving equal time was cutting into the bottom line of broadcast facilities. Because remember, if someone's broadcasting, spewing a lie for 15 minutes, and someone comes and complains, and you have to give them 15 minutes, that affects the bottom line. So he rescinded this. One of the reasons he rescinded it, not only because he thought it was antagonistic to the First Amendment, but it affected the bottom line of broadcast facilities. And, Ronald Reagan, he's a lover of corporations and big business. So people that read this book, the young people that read this book, can't believe it. And I give it out all the time. As a matter of fact, this book, what I did is I took this book. There's a company called Tail Flick. And I don't even think they're doing this now. You could send them your book and they would go through it. Mm. They would read it, give an analysis, tell you what you needed to do to make it right. And so I sent this to them and they sent it back raging about how good the story was. It just needed to be more in depth. It needs better storylines. You need more characters.
So they wanted you to fictionize it.
They wanted me to really get into it. They wanted me to make a real story out of it. So what I did, and I've done for the last 2 years, and matter of fact, it's going to be released here hopefully in the next couple of weeks, I got back into the story and I made it a YA story, a young adult story. And I made it a story that I want to appeal to young women. Because I heard a comedian say the other day, we could sure fix a lot of things in this country if we would just, have like a generation of nothing but women. Huh. Okay. They do it in China. They can tell you. No, we'll take this one. But, I believe in women. I believe that women can fix a lot of the ills that we have in this country. So I've written this next book. It's called Bonnie's Law, The Return to Fairness. It's not out yet. Will be soon. But it's actually on these are self-published. Bonnie's Law was such a good story. I went and got a best-selling author involved in this story, and he's going to help me promote it because he liked it that much.
Great.
This guy is a best-selling Amazon author. But what I've done is I've taken this story and I've made it about this one girl. Her name is Molly. And Molly has eidetic memory, and they discovered it when she's 2 years old. And as Molly grows up, she becomes a very intelligent girl, but she's so loved by everyone and she's so easy to get along with. She ends up teaching her kids and her friends in school the things that she's learning. So she's growing this whole audience of friends from first grade. She didn't go to kindergarten because she was smarter than everybody. They started her in first grade. And so she starts teaching her friends, all the things that she knows. And in fourth grade, she meets Bonnie Martinez, who comes to her town from Mexico, and they become best friends. And somewhere around somewhere around seventh grade, they end up going to a horse ranch, and they end up loving horses. So these two little girls fall in love with a horse, and they go to horse rescue. And then in ninth grade, the Big Bob of the radio station, Big Bob, comes to the radio station with Tom, and Big Bob and Tom tell the ninth grade social studies class about President Reagan's decision to rescind the Fairness Doctrine. And these two little girls see the damage that could be done. And it really becomes something that they begin to fight for. And they end up in senior high in the senior year as the debate team, the champions of the state, debating whether or not Reagan should have rescinded the Fairness Doctrine. And fast forward all the way through, Bonnie ends up passing away, and Molly decides that she's going to take this Fairness Doctrine eventually and bring it back and gets all the way to the Senate, and then goes to run for president because she's going to bring back the Fairness Doctrine.
All right.
So that's my next book, and it's coming out soon, and I'm very excited about it. So,
well, you got me all excited about it. We
Thank
got to have you and your best-selling Amazon author back when this book comes out.
cool. I'm sure he'd love that. He's a very nice guy. I'll have more details on my website at krcurry.com.
Which you will be able to find on the website after this show goes off the air.
Yes.
I'll have all of Kim's links all on the website. You can find it under live, under the side banner, guest links. So what after that book, what do you plan on doing after that?
Well, here's the deal. The way I set this book up was Molly, who decides she's going to run for president. She decides she's going to run for president, but you don't know if she has yet. So she's filed paperwork to go run for president. The next book, we'll talk about what happens then. But it's going to get real serious now, because you know what I've decided? You know, this is a serious issue in America. The division we have in this country and the lies that are being spewed that divide people have to be stopped somehow. So I'm taking this next book very seriously. In Bonnie's Law, The Return to Fairness, Molly actually gives the answer again, like I told you a little while ago, on how you can stop the madness. So she reveals that in her book, She reveals that in Bonnie's Law, The Return to Fairness. But I believe that you could even go further in exciting young people that, yes, you could change this. All we have to do is get people involved. You know, once you get past what we call P1s in radio, the P1s, the ones who really pay attention. When you get past the P1s, the P2s, the P3s are where there really is an audience. The P1s, the guys who really don't like the Fairness Doctrine, are a minority, and they're vocal. But when you get past the P1s and get to the P2s, the secondaries that aren't so rabid, I've talked to many Republicans about my vision of bringing the Fairness Doctrine back and talk to them about the death of fairness, and they agree. Let's bring back truth. Why can't we debate this so we can decide truth on our own? So yeah, it offends people when I say that I want to bring back the Fairness Doctrine. But people that see the truth, and the truth is you should be able to hear both sides to make your own decision. So, you know, it's antagonistic to both sides of the story.
Did you ever think about running for office anywhere?
You know,
Too much
no.
stress, right?
My job is to excite. I'm looking to get somebody, some young woman, some little girl out there, and believe me, this guy is going to help me promote this. I've even got, you know,
I see a movie deal in your future.
Yeah, I can tell you that everything that the tail flick people told me that would make it, if you'll do these things, you've got a great book here. I did it in Bonnie's Law, The Return to Fairness. I'm very excited. I can tell you that this best-selling author would not be paying attention to me if it wasn't a real story. So, you know, when this comes out and people read the story, they're going to get excited because it's a great tale. It'll make you cry. It'll make you laugh. But it's going to make you realize that there's a problem here that we can all fix. All we have to do is realize we've got to get off our tails and change it, because it can be changed. You know, and
Change starts with just one person.
I preach to young people all the time. You're eating off the plate your grandparents and parents have given you. How does it taste?
Right.
You've got to get off that plate. You got to put your own food on that plate. I believe the young people in this country can save America. There's enough of them. They just don't know how to do it. And you
Let's
can
be honest,
find
Kim, most of them don't care.
They don't care. They don't care. But what you can do is you can motivate some, because there are TikTok influencers. They do believe in some of these people that are out there. And I'm looking for a TikTok influencer to read my book and wear my Bonnie's Law penuelo. In the book, Bonnie's Law, The Return to Fairness, they end up wearing these penuelos. They are headbands that say Bonnie's Law. So I've had a bunch made up. So whenever I send my books out, they're gonna have a Bonnie's La Penuelo. So you really can change things. You could get somebody on TikTok famous enough telling the right truth and influence people.
Yes, you can.
You really can. And so I'm looking for that.
And you'll find it. You'll find it.
I'm-
Have you gotten on TikTok yet? Have you made your own TikTok account?
You know what, man? I'm 66 years old and computer dumb. The only reason I'm talking to you today is because my 18-year-old daughter was home to be able to figure out how come I couldn't get in.
Well, I tell you what, if you can get her to do a little 1 to 3 minute video, we'll put you on our TikTok.
Well, trust in knowing that.
Give us your message and we'll put it out there.
Well, I appreciate that because I believe in this. I believe in this story. And those who have read the snippets of the story believe it too. So I'm really impressed. I think these guys are going to really do a good job for me, and I think a lot of people are going to hear about this. Plus, I'll be promoting it on my Facebook and on my Insta and on my webpage. I'll be doing that, and I'm going to promote this. This has been really good, Jason. You're good at this. I'll be promoting this too.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And
No
don't go nowhere after the broadcast
Yes.
ends the live. I want to get all those links, and I want to make sure I give everybody a way to find you and your books, because
All right,
we're definitely going to get you back for the next one.
Appreciate that.
It's been a pleasure. I'm glad I can have a Miami legend on the show. You know what I mean?
Well,
like I said, and you are a testament to it, when you place yourself in a room with a constant legend, you yourself become legendary.
Well, and here's what I learned about being in a wheelchair. When it first bugged me that I was in a wheelchair and people didn't like me, what I realized was I'm the guy that gets to control the narrative.
Right.
Because when I roll into a room, who do they look at?
You.
So I have completely changed. I mean, I went from cowering to when I roll into a room now, I'm the guy you talk to, because I'm the guy saying, "Hey, good morning. What's up? How are you? What's up?" I don't have a problem having people hold the door for me. Yo, tall person at the grocery store, grab that off the top shelf. I'm a very vocal guy. I've turned it around. If I'm going to be here, you're going to hear from me. So
Right. You found yourself again.
there I am.
We're glad to have you back.
Thanks, Jason. I appreciate it very much.
No, the pleasure was all ours. And like I said, we hope to have you back on to promote the other book.
I appreciate that. I would love to do it.
Hey, you have my information. You can always set it up.
And I'm sorry it took me so long to get hooked up. Like I said, thank God for
it happens. It happens. The viewers aren't any stranger to me putting the time up a little more, because it happens every week. It usually happens on the Saturday night show. We're a little less organized there, and we have a little more drinks on that show as well. So that's why we're a little disorganized on that show, but it gets the job done. And like I said, whoever is listening to this live or who follows us in the archives, you can catch all of Kim's links on the website. I'll put them on the website. Go get his books. Make sure you listen to what he has to say, because it's very important for you to get your voice back. So just remember that. And that's what we're all about. The voices. All them voices. That's right. So you tune in every week. Every week, damn it. Both shows.
Jason, this is fun, man. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. It's been a lot of fun.
Thank you. We
Yes,
got it.
sir.
Like I said, we have to have you back on. We have
All right,
to
man.
do it. And like
My
I said, we never should listen to Reagan, but sometimes Reagan should listen to himself, because government's first duty is to protect the people and not to run their lives.